Good evening, everyone. Welcome to UCAN, Unacademy's Current Affairs Navigator program. We are here to discuss current affairs specifically in the domain of social issues and social justice that have been doing the rounds for the last 2 odd weeks. This is a specialized program to cover current affairs by subject experts. So I would be taking 2 classes this month specifically for social issues and social justice. Allow me a minute to check with the backend team if everything is okay, and then we will resume. I'll try to also look at your comment section. If everything is fine, we will resume. Good evening, good evening. All right, everything looks great. Let's begin. Now, our topic, the first few topics that we'll be doing in a lot more detail because that require a lot of discussion when it comes to the mains perspective. Since social issues and social justice are predominantly topics that come in the main stage of the examination, the MCQs are going to be few, but a lot of mains related discussion will be important for the first 4 topics, and the other 3 topics are going to be in the form of mains enrichment. What does it exactly mean? I will tell you when we reach there. Let's begin with the first topic, the underrepresentation of women in the higher judiciary or judiciary per se. Why is this important? Any topic, you have to trace the relevance back to the syllabus and back to the previous year questions. Does it form a part of our syllabus? The answer is yes. In GS1, we have a specific topic of issues relating to women and women's empowerment. And in GS2 as well, there is a topic relating to the steps taken for the empowerment of the vulnerable sections, and that is why this becomes important. Has there been a previous year question? The answer is yes. In 2021 mains, there was a direct question on the desirability of increasing. Why should we increase the representation of women in the judiciary? What will be the positive implications of the same? In that light, there was a question, women's representation in the judiciary. That is why this topic becomes extremely important. They do tend to ask questions on these lines: women's representation in the parliament, in the political sphere, in the labor force, and therefore also judiciary becomes important. Let's discuss this particular article in a lot more detail along with certain mains enrichment pointers that will help you in scoring those extra marks. Let's start with the diagram to understand that what is the data, what does the data suggest, and what does the representation is like. Okay, if you see this as a pyramid, this is your district judiciary, this is your high courts, and the apex court being the top tier triangle. In the Supreme Court, the representation of women is only, in the Supreme Court judges, it's only 9%. In the High Court, it is about 13%. And in the district judiciary, in the subordinate judiciary, it is about 36%. This is the Supreme Court, this is the High Court, this is the district level. Very, very important. You can make this diagram. These aren't very tough figures to remember. Just simply make this diagram, and this is how you start your answer as well. Okay, so with this low representation specifically in the successive tiers, in the higher levels, there is a problem, and this is the data set that we have. Not just this, we also have regional disparities. For example, there are certain states, for example Punjab and Haryana High Court, etc., where the representation is much better of women in the high courts, of women judges. But there are other states also such as Odisha, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, where the levels are much lower. So there are regional disparities as well, but you do not have to go into that. Now, just a simple brief about what are the reasons, what are the causes behind this particular trend that we are witnessing. So let's understand the reasons and simple causes that account for this underrepresentation. The first and foremost reason that the author particularly points out is that there is a funnel effect. What do you mean by a funnel effect? Almost like a cause and effect. For example, if there will be a small sample in terms of a small sample within which you have to choose and elevate certain advocates from the bench, from the bar, to become judges. If the advocates or the senior advocates itself, in that area itself, women are underrepresented, this will translate into the appointments in higher judiciary. And that is the funnel effect, that underrepresentation as senior advocates or in the bar councils, this hinders, this reduces the sample size, and therefore this does not translate into elevation as judges. That is the funnel effect. The reverse funnel effect is also absolutely true, because there are very few examples, very few role models who are particularly seen as success stories in the field of judiciary, in legal reforms. That is why the inspiration for a lot of women to join the legal services is lesser. So this is the reverse effect also, which is absolutely true. The second cause or reason behind the same is that there are gendered roles. What do you mean by gendered roles? Gendered roles such as responsibilities relating to caregiving, relating to domestic chores, which are considered the responsibility of women per se, and therefore their retention in careers, in legal careers as advocates, etc., is a bit of a problem. And most judicial services rules, generally have a particular criteria where they have to see a certain type of seniority, they need to see a certain time frame of continuous service that is required for any kind of recommendations or alleviation. Okay, so that also becomes a problem, that due to gendered roles or double burden faced by women per se, such as caregiving responsibilities, etc., there are breaks in career. There are breaks, for example, maternity leave, for example, breaks due to shifting of houses, so on and so forth. And therefore, this limits the professional choices. This limiting of the professional choices and the breaks, that is why most of the times they are not preferred as the number one choice when it comes to recommendations, etc. Yes, the third problem associated with this is certain stereotypes. I think you would have heard about the term called glass ceiling. There are certain stereotypes that exist that basically reinforce that women are particularly not very equipped for leadership roles, for higher positions, yes, for deciding roles per se. And therefore such stereotypes in workplace or discrimination, maybe in the courts, maybe in the bar councils, maybe in the legal or the criminal justice system, these also hinder or basically reduce the incentive for women to join this particular stream of work. So there are certain stereotypes and there are certain problems at work, such as sexist remarks, such as certain, for example, stereotypical notions, etc. Yes, and therefore this undermine the confidence. What else is a reason for low representation? Generally, legal services or law firms, etc., which generally hire advocates or you become senior advocates, there is a lot of networking that is involved in it. For that, you need to have networks in a male-dominated domain, in a male-dominated sector. Generally, the kind of advocates that are preferred are also second generation, third generation advocates. And therefore, this becomes an institutional hindrance when it comes to women joining these services. Yes, so therefore, lack of networked support in a male dominated work sector, that becomes a problem. Next, the collegium system or the appointment system is also a panel which is often, and that is the funnel effect that I was talking about, which is often dominated by men. And the opaque collegium system, sometimes the criteria are not particularly transparent about how there will be an elevation, how there will be a particular choosing of a candidate. Yes, so the opaque collegium system also becomes a problem when it comes to judicial appointments. Generally, male candidates are preferred because of a possible bias by a male dominated panel. That can also be the case. What else? A lot of studies particularly say that even those high courts, even in the high courts, even in the in a lot of high courts in multiple states, there are no separate toilets. Basic infrastructure, supporting infrastructure is lacking for even female judges, let alone the lawyers, the litigants, so on and so forth. So the lack of supporting infrastructure becomes a problem. In supporting infrastructure, we can also talk about additional infrastructure. For example, childcare centers, for example, creche centers, so on and so forth. This also becomes a hindrance. How you have a lot of dropout rates because of non-availability of separate toilets. Even in the education sector, here also a lack of supporting infrastructure acts as a deterrence, acts as a disincentive per se. Yes. Next, what it means is 7. Next point. Underrepresentation. Underrepresentation is also, because of this, a reverse impact also happens. The lack of role models. Women generally entering the legal services will feel that there is very little scope of mobility in the professional careers, and therefore they would be disincentivized. They would not be inspired to take up these roles. So these are certain reasons that we have talked about. Now, it's important to talk about why is it important. In the light of the mains MCQ, why is it important to increase this underrepresentation that we have witnessed? What positive implications can it possibly have? The first and foremost point is that whenever you're talking about judgments, whenever you're talking about deciphering certain cases, whenever the courts are hearing particular issues that involve women, that involve family matters, that maybe involve domestic abuse cases, that maybe involve child custody cases, so on and so forth, it is very important. It is very important to have a gendered lens to that particular problem as well. Imagine you are denying the agency of the particular woman to herself take an opinion on a particular issue that affects women. So if there is a male dominated panel, if there's a male dominated bench, and there's not even one single woman's opinion, that is a form of a non-inclusive kind of a judiciary system. Yes, for example, if it is relating to a posh case, prevention of sexual harassment at workplace case, women can add to very minute and specific insights that maybe the male counterparts can generally overlook. So in that context, it's important to have women representation when it comes to 50% of the population. Please note, if you talk about the historical times, even when we spoke about the Ilbert Bill controversy, where Indians were debarred to hold judicial positions or to be judges, there was a huge protest against it. We felt extremely hurt by the particular bill, which would debar Indians from being judges. Yes, and therefore internally, even when we have become independent, we should ensure that 50% of the population is also represented equally when it comes to the judicial roles. Yes, so first things first, what will it do? It will provide for diverse and gender specific perspective when it comes to judgments. And what will happen in turn because of these perspectives? It will help in enriching the judgment. It will help in making the judgment more comprehensive. Yes, and examples you can give: possible issues relating to POSH, issues relating to, for example, domestic abuse, so on and so forth. It is very, very important to take a diverse opinion, specifically opinion of a person that might be the victim in such cases. Yes, next. It will bring about to include, if we include more women in the higher judiciary, it will bring about more empathy. It will also help in sensitization. If you would have heard of child-friendly courts, specifically when it comes to the cases relating to POXO, in that, to have a child-friendly procedure for the whole trial is very, very important, and therefore women can bring about that empathy and sensitization even during those trials per se. It will be important because we are upholding Article 14 and Article 15 basically about equality, and therefore by increasing the representation, we will be upholding the constitutional mandate even in the field of judiciary. Yes, next. It also helps, please understand, the moment people feel that our demographic composition is reflected in the higher judiciary, which is passing judgments affecting our life, they trust the process a little more. If they feel that someone from the lower strata, someone who has reached those levels through merit, someone who is empathetic towards their cause, someone who can relate to their cause, for example women, it will increase the trust of the people in the institution of the judiciary or the judicial process per se. People will feel more related. It'll increase the relatability when it comes to these judicial processes. Yes, so it is very, very important, as we had known, that it is not just the justice that has to be delivered, but it also must appear to the people that justice has been delivered. So in that case, what we see is that diversity, because of increasing diversity, we would be making this more inclusive. And with more inclusivity comes more public faith and trust. Yes, so this will be enhanced because of this particular move. Next, it will help in breaking the stereotype. It will help in breaking the stereotype that women are not suitable for leadership positions. This stereotype will break, and therefore this will encourage more girls and women to join the legal system. Yes, so breaking the stereotype is very, very important. They will serve as role models. It is also very important to have a important lens towards social justice. A lot of cases which are affecting or matters affecting women can be pointed out by female judges. It can also improve the workplace environment when it comes to other judges per se. So this is going to be the effect when it comes to more representation per se. We will also be upholding other sustainable development goals such as SDG 5 relating to gender equality, so on and so forth, and therefore it is a good possible step. How do we do that? Certain solutions that you can possibly write are gender quota. So in judicial services, a lot of states can have particular gender quota, that certain number of seats are to be only taken up by female judges, so on and so forth, by increasing, for instance, supporting infrastructure in the form of separate sanitation related infrastructure, certain supporting infrastructure for childcare related responsibility, so on and so forth. We can also have a scheme, and this is what you can write in the way forward. We can also have a scheme in order to increase the options for internship, that is connecting new age lawyers or female lawyers with certain established senior lawyers or judges, so that that internship or the networking, which is a big problem or which hampers the intake or the upward mobility when it comes to these judges, that can be solved per se. So these kind of schemes, etc., can be a way forward, and that is all that we need to know when it comes to this particular topic. What are the general reasons? What is the impact? Why should we increase the representation? So this is a practice question. What factors contribute to the problem of low representation of women in higher judiciary? The first part of the question. Discuss the positive implications of making the judiciary more inclusive. So there are two parts to the question. First is the general reasons or causes, and the second is why should we increase the representation? And here you can also give a parallel. How we have a gender budget which specifically gives you the amount of funds that are invested only for pro-women scheme. So here also specifically a gendered perspective to judicial interpretation and decision making can enrich the decisions of the judiciary. And judiciary has been very upfront and has been extremely active when it comes to tackling social issues per se, and most of the social issues are affecting women, and that is why it becomes important. Let's come to the next topic, and before that I'll need you to do a question. But because we do not have a poll, I'll give you about 60 seconds. Think about the question. You can write the answer on the side, and then we can discuss, or you can check after I've discussed the question if it is correct or not. Consider the following statements. The Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act of 2016 provides that every child with benchmark disabilities has access or should have access to free education till the age of 18. The Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act also covers acid attack victims. Our Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act does not include specific learning disabilities like dyslexia and dysgraphia. Okay, please attempt this question. I'll just give about 60 seconds. I'll try to see your comments and then we will discuss it. Last 10 seconds and then we'll discuss this. All right. Let's discuss the question. Okay. So, Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act provides that every child, and this is absolutely correct, the first option is absolutely correct, okay, because though we have free and compulsory education under the Right to Education Act till the 8th grade, not till senior secondary grade, that is class 12, but RTE RTE particularly, Right to Education Act, has free and compulsory education till 8th grade. But if there is a student with benchmark disabilities, that is disability more than 40% and more, then the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016 overrides the Right to Education Act and states that a person with benchmark disabilities must be given free education till the age of 18, that is class 12th. Did you understand? A measure to promote inclusivity, a special measure to protect and promote learning opportunities for persons with disability. And that is a particular provision under this act. Clear? So statement number one is absolutely correct. Statement number two. The Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act also covers acid attack victims. Absolutely. This is absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. There are more than 20 disabilities that are written in the act per se, that are accepted as disabilities under the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act. Of course, this is the amended version of the previous act, and therefore with successive amendments, there are more disabilities that are included in the same. Yes, so acid attack victims are considered persons with disability in the particular act. The third statement, the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act does not include, now the problem is does not include specific learning disabilities. Yes, specific learning disabilities are a subsection of intellectual disabilities. That is something that we will discuss in the next article per se, and those are dyslexia. These are certain examples which have been covered. Dyslexia and dysgraphia. Dyslexia means the inability or difficulty in reading letters, in reading sentences, and dysgraphia is difficulty in writing your thoughts or information per se. And this is covered under the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act. Most people do not know of this. Yes, what this is and what are specific learning disabilities, I will discuss. So third statement is incorrect because these are covered under the act. Which of the given statements is or are incorrect? It's asking, and therefore the correct answer is C, that is 3 only. Yes, now let's discuss the topic. Let's discuss the topic, tackling learning disabilities head on. Now, there are various kinds of disabilities. Some disabilities are seen, some disabilities are properly seen. For example, locomotive disabilities where a person is maybe unable to move certain body parts. There is visual impairment, there is hearing impairment, so on and so forth. And there has been awareness relating to these disabilities. But there are certain disabilities which are generally less understood and therefore often ignored in terms of support. What are these disabilities? These are called specific learning disabilities. What do you mean by specific learning disabilities? These are a range of disorder that affect the ability to acquire, process and retain information. The way we or our neurological system or brain processes information or basically sends a signal to me that I have to read a particular sentence, or using certain information in my head, I have to form letters, I have to write a statement. These might be simple tasks for you and I. But for people with specific learning disabilities, there is a problem in which they process this type of ability. It does not mean that they lack the ability to understand. They absolutely understand, but there are certain things that are a problem. For example, dyslexia. I think most of us have been aware of this because of the movie Tare Zameen Par. Dyslexia is not a problem relating to general processing of information, but it is relating to processing letters. Letters do not seem normal to a person suffering from dyslexia. It is not easy to read text for that person suffering from dyslexia. But can that person particularly hear an audio or listen to a particular information and receive it and process it? Maybe the answer is yes. So there is not a proper intellectual disability, but one type of information that you and I can particularly read and retain, they possibly cannot. So dyslexia is a problem relating to, for example, reading letters and sentences. Dysgraphia is a problem relating to writing. They can process information. They can also speak information. Whatever they have understood, they will speak and tell you. But if you tell them to particularly write and express, there might be a problem in coordinating those skills neurologically. So these are specific, very specific learning disabilities. These are covered in your Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act. Now, what is the author particularly saying? What is the problem per se? The author is saying that these are vulnerable sections. Of course, this is a GS2 topic, vulnerable sections, and under vulnerable sections, we do disability or persons with disability. Has there been a previous year question? Let's understand that. There has been a previous year question talking about in general the shortcomings of the Persons with Disabilities Act. That we have an act, but it has not been so instrumental, it has not been so effective because of the lack of awareness, because of the lack of change of the attitude of administration or education institutes, so on and so forth. So there has been a question on Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, not just the provision, but the shortcomings. What more must be done? What more must be done for the same? And this article absolutely will help us in understanding what more, when we are writing the topic of what more should be done, or specifically specific learning disability as a topic can be written when it talk about shortcomings or less focus on these type of disabilities. Let's understand what this means. Now, you are saying if they are included, if special provisions for this type of disability is included in this act, even the Right to Education Act particularly proposes that specific focus should be given to children with disabilities, assistive devices should be learned, teachers should be helping or be a little more hands-on per se, their travel should be supported. So those provisions do exist. Then what is the problem according to the author? The problem is that they should be focused more. They should be focused more because we have everything on paper. But does this translate into reality? Are they teachers who are specifically equipped to handle children with specific needs? The answer is no. Are they proper infrastructural schools where they use maybe technology, a certain other device to particularly teach? The answer is no. The teacher will still be using the blackboard, and maybe a person suffering from dyslexia might not be able to interpret or understand the information written on the blackboard. So therefore, you need tailor-made solutions in order to ensure that you have equal protection of law. So why is it that we need to focus on these children with specific learning disability? Is to ensure equal protection of law. What do you mean by equal protection of law? Equality before law means that everyone will be treated alike. Everyone is same in front of the law, in the eyes of the law. But equal protection of law means that if someone is at a disadvantage as compared to the others, if some sections are at a disadvantage, they particularly can be given some sort of special treatment so that we reduce that disadvantage and we bring them at par with the other sectors. That is equal protection of law. So reservation is an example of equal protection of law. So in order to ensure, we need to ensure equal protection of law for these students, yes, in order to bring about inclusivity in education, inclusivity in opportunities, yes. So inclusive education that will translate into more opportunities for these students and they are not left behind as compared to the other students. For that, what do we need? We need targeted interventions. What do you mean by targeted interventions? Specific tailor-made solutions. That means what will work in a normal classroom setup for majority of the students might not for these kind of students. The type of teaching, the method of teaching, the techniques of teaching might not work for these kind of students. So you need targeted interventions according to the specific disability that you are countering. In order to prevent, what do you have to prevent? The failure of the system or their alienation from the educational sector. What happens if a child goes to school and the child is not being able to process information? The child will slowly lose focus. They will slowly lose interest, and that will lead to social alienation, disillusionment with the school and education sector, and lack of interest in the education sector. Yes. So therefore, what the author says is that it is absolutely important to identify these disabilities at an early stage so that a child is not battling it for a very long time before it being addressed. So early intervention becomes an important part of tackling this issue. Early intervention or early diagnosis is absolutely important to ensure that we can intervene in time, and therefore we can prevent what? Prevent the loss of interest, and we can halt the problem of dropout. Yes, we can halt the problem of dropout and we can prevent the loss of interest, etc. And we can also lessen the tenure of psychological and emotional suffering. Because if a child, imagine a child which is fine otherwise but cannot just understand certain text. When he's hearing the teacher saying something, he can, but he cannot really understand the textual form of it. And most of our tests, most of our homework is done in a textual form. You have to write, you are given certain sheets to particularly solve. And that is why he's suffering and he cannot really express this. So early intervention, early diagnosis is very, very important. In fact, the Supreme Court, a lot of petitions were piled up in the Supreme Court, and the petitions demanded that when this disability, these disabilities, specific disabilities have been included in the 2016 Act, in the 2016 Rights of Persons with Disability Act, it is for the children now who can be diagnosed for it, who can be given a test to see if they have certain disabilities or not. But what about the individuals who are adults now, but they have not been diagnosed earlier when they were children? And therefore, the Supreme Court had asked the government, and the government has promised that by the end of this year, there will be a proper test, a diagnosis, a survey, which will ascertain if certain adults have these specific disabilities or not. And because of this, they can also take certificates and enjoy certain specific benefits with the same. So that is why it also becomes more important. The next thing that the author particularly says is that if you need these targeted interventions, who will give these targeted interventions? For that now comes in the specialized teacher training programs that we must ensure. Yes. So specialized teacher training becomes our next step when it comes to targeted interventions. Yes. So they must be well versed with certain they should have innovative teaching methods or teaching solutions. Yes. They should, for example, use multi-sensory. If you have senses, something to see, and if you're not processing letters, then at least multi-sensory means at least audio books can be a good solution to the same. So multi-sensory learning can make learning more effective for the individuals. Yes, so that is the next topic. We must also incentivize the teachers in the form of rewards, in the form of career advancements, etc., in order to get them a certain type of specialization. Why should one must do a specialization in the teaching for special needs? There must be some sort of incentives as well. Of course, there is a moral incentive, but other incentives can also increase the supply of teachers that are well versed with these specific teaching skills. Yes. Next particular intervention that the author says is that here is the time, and this is a beautiful example that you can also quote when you are doing your essay, and this is essay fodder, that you must leverage technology. What do you mean by leverage technology? Technology for a good social objective. For example, you have certain text to speech softwares that can be used. For example, a child is not processing letters. They could at least hear audiobooks. That is an example. So here you are leveraging technology. You can have also certain artificial intelligence generated tests for personalized learning. And these become important when it comes to using technology to enhance the experience, the learning experience, and ensure that the children are engaged in this type of learning. It has also been noticed that children who are suffering from these specific learning disabilities suffer from a lot of mental and emotional suffering per se. So these students particularly are, when they were surveyed, most of them reported cases of anxiety, loneliness, depression, so on and so forth. And therefore something which becomes very important in this domain is to provide emotional and psychological support to the children. Imagine a child not even understanding why he or she particularly is different than the others. In fact, these children are bullied a lot in schools because of their differences or their special abilities. So bullying is often reported by these children. So these kind of children generally report a lot of anxious behavior, and therefore we need proper counseling services to ensure that they are heard on a daily basis. Yes, so that becomes important. Next, a lot of research and data, okay, by investing in specialized interventions for them, a lot of data, experiences and research can also enrich our policies. It can help us understand better what we must do further for children with special ability. So it can enrich our policies as well as our laws and certain schemes as well. Yes, it is also important. Please understand. Have you heard the connection between or an interlinkage between disability and incidence of poverty? That incidence of poverty is more in persons with disability because there is a whole vicious trap. So by investing in the specific interventions for these children, what we are doing is that we are preventing, by giving them educational opportunities, we are preventing them from dropouts. We are enhancing their employability, and therefore we are preventing them from falling into the poverty trap later on. Yes, so this is something what we call as ensuring social justice. Yes, so that becomes important. Of course, in this what we are doing is also upholding the ideology enshrined in the preamble, securing for all justice, socio-economic and political. So this becomes important in that regard as well. So poverty also you can match it to that if we do not intervene now, they are not going to be employable in the future, and therefore there will be a higher incidence of poverty, a reduction in standard of living, so on and so forth. And any intervention here can lead to better and lasting results in the future. Yes. Last but not the least, what the author says is that in this domain, it is also very important to ensure awareness is generated. Because without this, there will be no reporting of these cases. Awareness for also parents and guardians. Parents and guardians must understand what specific disabilities are. In fact, you would see most of the parents, if they themselves are not aware of the same, they would generally pass comments such as the child is particularly lazy, the child is not doing the homework just because they are lazy. Yes, if the child had to narrate something, they can, but if they had to write, for example, people with dysgraphia, they cannot. So the parents generally would make such statements, and you would have heard of them, that he is good or she is good, but they do not do it. Sometimes there is an underlying problem, and therefore it is important for parents and guardians to be aware. It is also important to remove the stigma attached to certain disabilities, and therefore we have a lot of cinema as well, and you can write the example of the movie Tare Zameen Par. Yes. And that is what the author has also particularly written. So these are the important factors that we must ensure to help the children with specific learning disabilities. That is the article that is right now. So how do you use this article? If at all there is a question with persons with disabilities, mention these disabilities and the specific focus needed. Or if there is a shortcoming when it comes to why are the interventions that we have for persons with disabilities, why are they not being particularly effective? In that you can write about the specific issues, that not just certain disabilities have to be covered on paper, but you need to ensure the supporting infrastructure, etc., is also in place for the same. Yes. So with this, now we'll come to our next topic. This topic, now I'm not discussing this article, but I'm discussing this particular topic called the toxic work culture. Toxic work culture. This has been discussed quite a lot of time. I will tell you why this particular topic is important. Now, work culture is a topic that is important from many perspectives. In GS paper 1, you would often find questions which are relating to what is the impact of certain shifts, maybe in working culture, maybe when it comes to the pandemic on the society. For example, right after the pandemic, a year after maybe the pandemic, there was a question that how has work from home particularly affected individuals. There is a question on young women. For example, young women, why are they particularly committing suicide? What are the reasons for the same? Yes, when it comes to technology also, when it comes to ICT technology, tablets, etc., what is the effect or impact on children? In fact, even this year in the essay paper, they had asked about that what is the impact of this FOMO culture. Have you heard that topic in the essay? What is the impact of the FOMO culture? Yes, fear of missing out culture due to social media. What has been the impact on the society per se? So this has been a general trend, and this is what exactly I'm going to be discussing. Not toxic work culture per se only, but the effect, what generally means by toxic, and the impact it has on society, on working individuals in India. That can become the focus of a topic or the question that is formed. This is also written directly in your syllabus. Where in your syllabus is work culture written? It is written in GS paper 4 as well. Work culture. Yes, so it becomes important. Either it will be asked in GS1, that is the impact on society, or it will be asked in GS paper 4 in some form or the other. It becomes important. Now, let's discuss just the simple impact on society. What is the context? Can you tell me that what is the context that actually sparked this debate, that basically increased the debate around working or regulating work culture per se? I'm checking the comment section. You can tell me what do you think is the context? Has some incident recently occurred which has sparked this particular debate? The recent episode, absolutely. So a young 26-year-old employee working in an MNC in Pune died, and the parents had accused and allegedly said that this is because of overworking or the burden that she had at workplace in terms of excessive deadlines, so on and so forth. There are often a lot of statements made by industry leaders also demanding or suggesting a 70 work hour week, etc. And also certain narratives in Europe which are in fact now demanding just a 4-day work week. So there are different perspectives on the same. We are not going to be seeing what is right or not. We are not getting into the debate of whether workplaces or profit enterprises or private enterprises, whether they should be regulated or not, whether they should be allowed to liberally function or not. That is not my focus here. My focus here is that if we say that toxic work culture exists, with that assumption, let's understand how does it negatively impact the society. That is our focus in GS paper 1. Is this absolutely clear? The context? Yes. So in this context, let's understand the 26-year-old employee working in an MNC died, and it was alleged that this was because of work pressure. Can this be your introduction? Can this be your introduction in a mains answer? The answer is absolutely yes. This can be your introduction in a mains answer. Now let's understand what do you mean or how does it impact toxic work culture? How does it particularly impact adversely the population, the Indian society per se? First things first, okay? First things first. What do you mean by a toxic work culture? A toxic work culture has a detrimental impact or a detrimental effect on the physical, on the emotional, and the psychological well-being of the employee. Yes, so that can be considered toxic. If the employees are suffering because of being at work, the suffering could be of any kind. Yes, if there is certain kind of disrespect at work, if there is certain kind of abuse at work, if there is certain kind of over exploitation at work, if there is certain kind of pressure at work, if there is a certain kind of imbalance when it comes to work and life, all that can become toxic. If there is certain kind of favoritism at work, if there is less inclusive policies at work, if only certain stakeholders in the organizations are benefiting and the others are particularly just toiling, that is a problem as well. So these are attributes when you talk about a toxic work environment. So a work environment that has a detrimental effect on the mental, the physical, and the emotional well-being of an employee. Yes, So that becomes a toxic work environment. Simple definition and you can remember it. So what are the factors that are creating this toxicity at work? The first and the foremost factor is unrealistic deadlines. This is also called positive toxicity. What do you mean by positive toxicity? You are made to believe as an employee. It is not just encouragement, but you are made to believe as an employee that these unrealistic deadlines are possible. That is toxic positivity. That you are pumped with encouragement, even though it is physically or it is according to the time span not a feasible task to perform, yet you are constantly pumped and encouraged. So these are situations of high pressure. So areas of high pressure: unrealistic deadlines, those that cannot be particularly matched, and cutthroat competition. These can sometimes lead to a lot of stress, anxiety, depression, etc. in the individual. So the example or the problem can be mental health issues such as anxiety, such as stress, such as depression, so on and so forth. In fact, the NCRB also said, National Crime Reports Bureau, the report particularly said that suicide among salaried professionals constituted 10% of the total suicides in India. Yes, and that is why it is high. Suicide amongst the professional, okay, is high in India. So 10% of the suicides that happened in India, those individuals were salaried professionals having some form of work stress, reporting some form of work stress. Yes, so that becomes a major price. Next, cost cutting. What do you mean by cost cutting? That because of so many times what the employer particularly does, in order to garner a significant portion of the profits, the work that should ideally be given to 3 people, that should be divided amongst 3 people, is to be done by 1 individual in order to cut the cost when it comes to salaries. So cost cutting or over exploitation becomes a problem in work environments. Hiring one or engaging one for the work of 3, that can be an example. And this leads to an overwhelming burden, a higher increase in burden, and leads to a major burnout effect. You will burn out very, very soon. This also is supported by reports. In fact, ILO, International Labour Organization said that Indians comprise one of the most overworked population in Asia and also in India. In fact, so Indians are one of the most overworked, with approximately 50% of the working individuals having more than a 50-hour work week. That is what the ILO report particularly suggests. So this also becomes a problem. Next toxicity that we witness in certain corporates or MNCs or work culture could be workplace harassment or bullying. Yes. So workplace harassment, bullying, abuse, maybe verbal abuse, and very strict hierarchical structures. That means the person at the lower rungs of the organization has no way in order to make sure that his grievances, his suggestions, his opinion reaches the higher levels. It is a very strictly defined power structure, and the person might be very good in terms of ideas, but their ideas are constantly snubbed. They do not reach the higher ranks of the organization. There is workplace harassment, bullying, and verbal abuse. Yes, so this also becomes a problem. In fact, this is a problem which is disproportionately faced by women as well, when the harassment can also mean sexual harassment at workplace, some sexist remarks at workplace, yes, certain sexist jokes at workplace. So this is also a problem when it comes to the toxicity at workplace. Yes, certain uncomfortable advances at workplace, certain quid pro quo engagements at workplace, demanding sexual favors for promotions at workplace. So this is something that we talk about when it comes to toxicity at the in the workplace. This of course leads to major drop in confidence of the employees. Yes. Next, if a workplace does not value meritocracy, merit, would that workplace give you a sign of encouragement to constantly work? If you know that whatever you may do for that promotion will still be given to one of the favorites of the higher bosses, to one of the relatives of the higher bosses. That means if nepotism or if favoritism exists at the workplace, this becomes a major disincentive. That means your effort is not recognized. Do you think at this kind of a workplace, workers will have any kind of incentive to continue to perform better? There will be a low morale. There will be a lack of incentive because there is no upward mobility on the basis of meritocracy. And therefore, this will demoralize the workers. It will be letting down of meritocracy. Yes. And therefore, this kind of a worker, don't you think this kind of a worker also will have no incentive to innovate? So any kind of innovative potential generally comes with recognition of those new ideas, recognition of that new product. Yes. Next, the trust deficit at workplace leading to micromanagement. What do you mean? That you as a boss or a senior ranking official can never truly delegate a responsibility to an individual because there is trust deficit. It is not basically managing overall or seeing if the work is done. That kind of an intervention is absolutely valid by the seniors. But making sure or creating hindrances in even the smallest of permission sometimes leads to a lack of zeal for innovation. So this trust deficit or micromanagement also reduces the general morale of the organization. What else? If you feel that your skills are not matched, if there is an organization that is making you do the same kind of work that you had initially joined for, even though you have innovated, even though you have diversified in terms of skills, even though you have chosen something different in the tenure of your work, and you are maybe better equipped at something than what you are currently doing, what is happening? There is a mismatch because your voices are not heard, because your opinion and feedback is not heard, because these boardrooms etc. are not inclusive in terms of you trying to take another venture or a particular skill set in the workplace. What will continue to happen? Because you are not heard, no inclusiveness, no participation of stakeholders. Because of this, what will happen is there will be a mismatch between what is your potential and what you are currently doing. A major mismatch. How does it affect the society? What is happening because of this? It will affect the society is because the human capital that we have, the human resource that we have, we are not using them optimally. There is underutilization of a person's potential because of a toxic work culture. Yes, so non-optimum use of the human capital in India. That becomes again a problem, and that is affecting the Indian workforce, so on and so forth. What is next? Because there is hardly any hand holding or training, etc. Therefore, we see internships in India or learning in the course of your job in India, mentorship in India, career progress and upward mobility in terms of skills in India is a big problem. Yes, so restriction, major restrictions in upward mobility, because this leading to lack of mentorship. That is required for what? For upskilling of the population. Upskilling the population. Do you see how I'm using? Please understand how I'm using. If this is a question on society, I'm using the UPSC terminology that is mentioned in the syllabus as well. They asked this year a question on human capital. That is nothing when that is from the syllabus topics of social sectors, health, education and human resource that I'm talking about. Human resource also involves skilling per se. Yes, so these are topics when you're writing an answer in GS1 or GS2, be cognizant of it, that you are attaching or you are basically ensuring that you are making that linkage between toxic work culture and how is it impacting individuals, youth or the society at large. Yes, next. This can also lead to tensions at workplace or tension or abuse or overwork at workplace, can lead to strained social relationships. How can you say that? Can you explain to me this in the comment section? Can you tell me how tensions at workplace can affect social relationships? Please engage. How can tension at workplace lead to strained social relationships? Absolutely. Have you heard about certain issues that when there was the time of the pandemic, during the COVID times or during the times of the pandemic, when there was stress in terms of no work opportunities for few people, when there was a problem when it comes to income opportunities, when there was a problem when it comes to a lot of people being unemployed during the times of the pandemic, that stress, and these are reports and I'm not stating this, that stress related to an increase in the cases of domestic abuse. More cases of domestic abuse were reported because there was stress or strain relating to financial resources with households. Yes. So therefore, if you are, and therefore this can increase, if you are coming with that kind of mood, if you are stressful yourself, You might maybe have a strained relationship at home. And this also happens because individuals who are working tirelessly for hours and hours are away. They are isolated from families. They are only seeing the families maybe twice a year on certain festivals. So isolation from families we can also lead to certain domestic abuse. It can also lead to certain fights, even in the office space, fights amongst colleagues, yes, and therefore this can hamper the social fabric of the country. The social fabric of the country. It can create tensions in the society if this is not particularly addressed. Yes, can this also affect otherwise, last but not the least, certain work hours and no work-life balance. No work-life balance. Have you heard that the burden of the diseases in India, of the non-communicable diseases that are relating to lifestyle, diets, etc., is much more than the burden due to infectious or communicable diseases? One of the reasons for the same is this particular hustle culture, where work and overworking only is glorified even at the cost of your health. And therefore, because of this no work-life balance, we see a rise in obesity in India, a rise in non-communicable diseases. Example, heart attack, cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, etc. Because we are suited, what we are now used to is a sedentary lifestyle, is a lifestyle on the desk. In fact, because of AC rooms, etc., now what is recognized as vitamin D3 is almost understood as an urban deficiency. People have forgotten how to go out in the sun. So therefore, no work-life balance is also has not just mental ramifications or emotional manifestation, but it also has physical detrimental impact. In fact, a lot of people in order to just continue hustling, what they do is to not feel overwhelmed at a particular time. It is very easy to also be addicted. So addictions relating to substance abuse are also generally seen as an easy escape from the mundane life that a particular individual is leading. In fact, a lot of Western capitalists are also now, we hear of certain drugs that you can particularly take, which can increase the time span till which you can continue work and you do not need sleep. So those kind of drugs, those kind of habits, the excessive work culture is also now becoming toxic because it has certain ramification and you are trading economic gains even at the cost of your health. And as Mahatma Gandhi ji rightly put it, it is health that is the real wealth and not pieces of gold and silver. So this is something that you can talk about. And again, you can also say that with the post-pandemic time, what has happened is that even though we have now slowly moving towards hybrid cultures, hybrid work environments. What do you mean by hybrid? That there are few days in the week that you are particularly going to office and there are few days on which you can choose to work from home. Yes, so you can choose to work from home. What happens because of this? Have you not heard a lot of people nowadays saying that we rather used to prefer going to office because there used to be a proper demarcation of what are my working hours and what is my free time. The moment I would step out of that office building, I was not obligated for any work whatsoever. What does this mean? The boundaries of work and personal life were respected better in a physical environment when one had to go to office. Now with the post-pandemic setup, the trend is also hybrid work cultures, that is work from home, and therefore here there is a problem of no separation of boundaries. So you can also get a work call at about 11 o'clock if you choose to work at that time, and therefore you are constantly, sometimes a lot of people feel that they are constantly working without a break from the work from home setup. So that is something that you can talk about. That is the only impact that we need to know when it comes to work from home. These are enough pointers that you have to write if at all a question comes on the same. Now, let's move to the next topic. The next topic, we will begin with the question. I need you to attempt this question maybe in the comment section, or you can write the answer on the side and you can check when I'm explaining the question per se. Consider the following statements. Gender Inequality Index is released by World Economic Forum. Global Gender Gap Index is released by UNDP. In the Global Gender Gap Index, India has closed the maximum gender gap in the political empowerment category or indicator. Clear? Please attempt this and then we will discuss it. I will give you 60 seconds for the same. Let's discuss this. Consider the following statements. Now, please understand these are two very, very, very important reports when it comes to gender, when it comes to any question that you may have to write when it comes to women or the problems faced by women in GS1 or GS2. That is why I wanted you to do this in the form of a prelims MCQ, as well as you can use this information from this question to even write in your mains answers. Okay, consider the following statements. Gender Inequality Index is not released. What has happened in the first statement and the second statement is there is an interchange. So Gender Inequality Index is not released by World Economic Forum. It is released by UNDP, United Nations Development Program, under the Human Development Report. The famous Human Development Report is released, and as part of this, the Gender Inequality Index is also released. So the first statement becomes incorrect. Yes. Second statement, Global Gender Gap Index, very, very famous index. Very famous index. In fact, we quote this a lot in starting answers when it comes to the low representation of women in the workforce, low representation of women in the political sphere, so on and so forth. This is released by World Economic Forum. Very, very famous, and something that has also been asked in UPSC previously. So you must remember this even for prelims. So the second statement is also incorrect. In the Global Gender Gap Index, now this can be done logically. Look at the third statement. It says there are gaps. Gaps mean that there is a huge difference between how women are represented and how men are represented. So gap means that maybe there are 13 to 14% women in the parliament, and the majority of the men, or 85% of the men, of the parliamentarians are men. So there is a huge gap. When this becomes 50-50, we say that the gap is closed. That is what we mean by gap. Please understand now, multiple times we have discussed that a huge underrepresentation problem exists when it comes to women's representation in the parliament and in the political sphere. Then how is it that this particular indicator will be the indicator where we have closed the gap? This is in fact the indicator where maximum disparity exists. This is the indicator in which the maximum gap exists between men and women. There are multiple indicators on in Global Gender Gap Index, yes, but political empowerment is one of the indicators in which a huge gap still exists for India to cover. Yes, because we only have about 13 to 14% of the MPs in the parliament who are women. Then therefore a huge gap. So this becomes absolutely incorrect. Can you use this particular information in your mains answers? The answer is absolutely yes. So here you can talk about two domains. So there are certain areas in which we have done some progress and certain areas in which we are lagging behind. For example, this is the only thing that you need to remember here. Global Inequality Index released by UNDP as part of their HDR report. I just wanted you to remember these reports for prelims as well. And Global Gender Gap Report, famous organization, World Economic Forum. Remember? So all the 3Gs, the 3Gs report is by World Economic Forum. Remember this, Global Gender Gap. Okay? Now, in this Global Gender Gap Report, where we are ranked 129th, and this also becomes your data to introduce any answer when it comes to the problems faced by women. For example, even in this year, there was a question on what is gender equality, what is women empowerment, what is gender equity. In that, you could have started your answer by quoting maybe one report relating to the disparity faced by women. And the easier way is to remember the Global Gender Gap Index released by World Economic Forum. Yes? So this was the first two are incorrect. Why is the third incorrect? Look at this. If you've been following even a little bit of the news, you would understand that when it comes to educational attainment as a criteria, as a category, we have done significantly well to ensure the same amount of girls are going to school as the amount of boys. Okay, so there is no disparity. We are almost closed the gap. Do you see the score? We have almost closed the gap when it comes to girls. So in primary schools also, almost all the girls are going to school and almost all the boys are going to school in the country. This gap is also reduced in the senior secondary school levels, also in the higher education now. So when it comes to education, girls, same number of girls almost are going to school as the number of boys. So the gap does not exist in this parameter, in this category. Similarly, if you see the health and survival category, I do not want you to get into details. I just want you to know which are the areas in which we have performed well and which are the areas that still require a lot of focus and intervention. So in educational attainment, we have performed well. Even in health and survival, when it comes to specific areas such as maternal mortality, so on and so forth, we have ensured that women, their health and survival is almost at par with men. Yes, they are also similar. The gap is reduced. Which are the areas in which we still need to do a lot of progress? Economic participation, that women's role in the labor force is still very low. So this is an area which requires more focus. It needs to be addressed because women's labor force participation rate is only as about 36%. Yes, political empowerment. Do you see the gap? The gap, this is the area of the gap. The gap exists the most in the political empowerment category, because we have very few MPs as compared to, very few female MPs as compared to the male MPs. So that is what we see in this. How much is the gap is not the problem. Where is the gap the most is something that I was testing you in that question. Yes. So that is why all three statements are incorrect and D becomes your answer. That none of the above statements are correct. Is this understood? Yes? Absolutely. Now, let's do this particular article, which was, I think, in the Indian Express. It was a report by the International Labour Organization, an International Labour Organization report claiming that Indian women per se remain out of the labor force. They are not participating in economic activities primarily because they are particularly occupied by domestic care responsibilities and duties. This is what the report particularly mentions. Yes, so this becomes important, and this particular topic is that why, in general, why labor force participation rate, why female labor force participation rate is low in India. This increases, or this particularly gives this kind of a question right in front of us. Let's discuss this in a brief understanding, and then we will come to the mains enrichment pointers. Now, the first and foremost reason why women are not participating enough in the labor force or joining proper economic activities, first and foremost hindrance is cultural and social factors. So what are the cultural and social barriers? Cultural and social barriers. Have you heard about the term, and please use these terms when you're writing your answers? Sexual division of labor. Sexual division of labor. What does this mean? That the society is prescribing, the society is putting a certain role, the society is making sure that you feel responsible for certain acts, for certain tasks. For example, women are appreciated in the Indian society in a caregiving role, as domestic, as individuals focusing more on the domestic sphere, taking care of home. Those are the responsibilities that are celebrated according to the society in India. While men are considered as the predominant bread earners in a society. That is nothing but a societally decided sexual division of labor. It is prescribing what one must do and what one must not do. What one must prioritize and what one must not prioritize. Yes, so that becomes our first problem. Cultural and social barriers leading to sexual division of labor, hindering or restricting women in joining the workforce. The second problem is the gender stereotype. What do you mean by gender stereotype? That even if women are encouraged to work, it is generally considered by society that because you are a woman, you are particularly more equipped to handle certain job roles, and therefore you should be employed in those sectors. For example, have you seen an overwhelming representation or participation of women in caregiving roles? For example, the nursing staff. For example, the teaching and nurturing domain. Yes? So teaching, hospitality, nursing, for example, air hostesses, hospitality, etc. These kind of roles, taking care of people, nurturing individuals, nursing people, these are considered women-related attributes. It is considered, this is a stereotype that has been made, that women have these particular, perform these roles better than men. And this is a gender stereotype. What is happening because of this gender stereotype? You are limiting the avenues or limiting the sectors in which women are employed. In fact, these caregiving sectors are called the pink collar jobs. So you are restricting women in the pink collar jobs per se, even for the ones that are wanting to participate. The third problem is that women will be employable if they are given proper and good opportunities of education. Is that not the case? So education is a prerequisite for employability to exist. But even in the educational aspect, there are disparities when it comes to women. In fact, if you would have heard about a term that is used in the economic survey, it's called the sun meta preference and unwanted girls. So sun meta preference means that Indian couples would keep having children, will keep having children until they reach a justified number of boys that they want as children. Yes. So for example, if they've had 2 children and those are girls, they will continue to have the 3rd child until and unless they ensure that they have at least 1 boy child. That is sun meta preference. This is also leading to a problem of the first 2 girls being somewhat unwanted, and therefore their education is not focused on more. Their education is not invested in more. Yes. So educational disparities, even in the beginning, can continue to create a disability or a disadvantage later in the problem, in the context of employability. Isn't this the case? Yes. In fact, a lot of educational disparity, a lot of child marriages are a major cause of dropout for the girl child. So this becomes an issue in terms of employability. The next problem is that even though women are participating, but 90% of the women who are working in India, who are employed in India, they are concentrated in the informal sector of the economy. For example, the gig economy, for example, as domestic workers, as construction laborers, so on and so forth. Yes. So overwhelming concentration in the informal economy. This is a problem. What does this do? The women are denied social security benefits. The women are exposed to vulnerable conditions at workplace, poor conditions at workplace where they cannot exercise their legal rights, their labor rights, so on and so forth. Yes. And therefore, this leads to a major issue. Next, what acts as a disincentive for women also, and this is pointed out by ILO as well, is a major problem of wage disparity. What do you mean by wage disparity? For the same kind of work done by a man and done by a woman, they will be paid differently in the way that the man will be paid more than the woman. That is wage disparity. Yes. So in fact, ILO has particularly said that almost 27% of gap or disparity exists when it comes to women and men in India. This figure is of course higher when it comes to the informal sector, because informal sectors are not easily regulated. Yes. So wage disparity, that means non-equal pay for equal work, becomes a issue. In fact, a lot of women, even in the entertainment industries, proper established actresses, have also pointed out this problem of wage disparity in even the cinemas. Yes. So this also becomes a disincentive for women to not join the workforce. Another major issue is called the double burden, and this is what the article talks about. I wanted to of course give you more pointers, but this is what the article talks about, that there is a major issue of double burden. What do you mean by double burden? For an employed woman in India, for a working woman in India, her job, her work does not stop the moment she steps out of office or the moment she's out of her workplace. In fact, she is overwhelmingly or disproportionately burdened by household duties, by domestic chores, and therefore she spends an overwhelmingly high amount of time in the domestic work or care related duties as compared to the men. And that is what the report particularly is saying. That ILO report particularly says, the ILO report says that almost more than 50% of the women in India, when they were surveyed, more than 50% of the women in India are outside the workforce due to their preoccupation with care responsibilities, because they are so overburdened by domestic responsibilities. And even the working women who are doing who are participating in economic activities, they are also burdened with household responsibility. Yes, and that becomes a double burden as well. In fact, working women spent about 5.8 hours for domestic work as compared to 2.5 hours by men. And that is why the disproportionate burden falls on women. In fact, we also have a term called motherhood penalty. What do you mean by motherhood penalty? That maternity is seen as a break in a woman's career. The moment a woman takes a maternity leave, in fact, we would have heard about a lot of these news articles where a lot of companies were criticized, and this came to this was being a part of the news, that a lot of companies were following discriminatory policies towards women who had just gotten married or were going to get married or were pregnant, so on and so forth. They were put behind, or some important projects were taken away from them. Even when they come back from their maternity leave, they are generally not considered for promotions, for upward mobility, so on and so forth. And therefore, women pay a huge price because of their reproductive rights as well. So motherhood penalty is also something that hinders the participation of women in the workforce. Please use these terms. These are the terms that will actually garner more marks for you as compared to a generalistic answer. Okay. Next, of course, is the problem of glass ceiling. What do you mean by glass ceiling? We had done the funnel effect also in the first topic. Glass ceiling basically is an invisible barrier. A ceiling, a type of a ceiling that exists but cannot be physically seen, but exists. So it is a kind of a social barrier that exists, that prevent women to rise up to leadership roles. It prevents women to take up decision-making positions such as CEOs, board members, so on and so forth. That even though women are part of the workforce, they are generally considered, or they are generally kept as the part of the lower rungs of the organization. They are never really promoted to the leadership positions. So a social invisible barrier that exists in upward mobility of women. That is the glass ceiling. So this also disincentivizes a lot of women for joining the workforce. Next problem, of course, is relating to workplace safety. That means cases of sexual harassment, problems relating to, or limitations relating to traveling at certain hours just because of safety issues also restrict a woman's full capacity at workplace. Yes. Next is the lack of supporting infra. What do you mean by supporting infra? if a woman has particularly given birth to a child? What about childcare centers? What about feeding rooms? What about creche facilities? So supporting infrastructure is also lacking to help her with a flexible environment at work. Yes. The next reason also quoted by certain sociologists is that in India, because of the patriarchal nature of the family, women are, in fact, a lot of families of the higher caste or the higher class, they take pride in the fact the women in their houses are not working. They take pride in the fact that women in our families are not required to work. Yes. So because of certain patriarchal notions, the moment the disposable income of the husband or the family increases, women are generally encouraged or maybe forced to leave the workforce per se. Yes. So with the increase in disposable incomes also, women are often relegated to the domestic responsibilities. Yes. So that is also something that you can talk about. Last but not the least is something very important and interesting. When we talk about digital literacy, now if we are not ensuring that women are also digitally literate, okay, or the disparity that exists in educational opportunities should not exist in digital literacy. Why is this required? Because we are talking about the skills of the future. Tomorrow, with the Industrial Revolution 4.0, women must, if they want to be employable, if they want their skills to not be redundant, they need to be trained in the new age technology related skills, for example, digital skills. So the digital divide or the digital disparity is also something that remains, and this needs to be countered in order to ensure the future of employability of women is ensured or is not a problem. Yes, so that also becomes a thing. Last but not the least, why is this important, and that you can use as a conclusion? Even the World Bank had said that if India wants to reap the full potential of its demographic dividend, the one key intervention must be to empower women and ensure the integration of women in the workforce. That is a suggestion. If 50% of the population is not fully integrated in the workforce, you are wasting your demographic dividend. And that is why the World Bank report said that India is squandering, or South Asian region is squandering their demographic dividend. Also, you can simply say wasting the demographic dividend. And in order to reap this, one important intervention is to increase women's participation in the workforce. So that is all that we have from this topic. Let's see the last mains enrichment topics. What do I mean by mains enrichment? By mains enrichment, I mean that there are certain topics that do not require a thorough discussion. These are topics that can be used as great examples or to enrich or add those brownie points in your mains answers. So the topic, of course, is done in your classes when you're doing the static portions. But to enrich those static portions, you must always take small bits of current affairs and use it as examples to enrich your answers, so that your answers are standing out as opposed to people who are writing simple suggestions. Did you understand? So these are the topics that I'll be going very quickly. I'll of course explain the topic, but I'll not fully explain the topic. I'll just tell you how can you use this piece of information in which area of your syllabus. Okay? Now, this was a particular news article. Private, not government, is primary school for children in Haryana, Manipur and Telangana. What do you need to remember? What you need to remember is that what is the general context in India? What is the general trend in India when it comes to education? And education is given in GS paper 2 as a syllabus topic. education, and there are questions on education as well. So what is this trend in education? That in the primary stages of education, that is from class 1st till class 8th, okay, majority of the children, almost 23-24% of the children in India are in private schools, and about 66% of the children in India are in government schools in the primary stage of schooling. Did you understand these two trends? So in the primary stage of schooling, that is from class 1st to 8th, 23-25%, a quarter of the children are in private schools and the other are in government schools. Okay, so that is the trend. What is the difference now? What is the difference now particularly? This is the case because we have right to education. So here the only thing that you need to remember is that majority of the children are in government schools. This is the national average. Okay. Now what is the trend? Because of Right to Education Act, education is free and compulsory from class 1st to 8th. So primary education is free and compulsory for every child in the country. Is that the case? Despite this, despite education being free and compulsory, what we are seeing is that in a few states, even if you do not remember the states and the exact figures, I do not need you to remember, for in a few states we have seen a reversal of this trend. For example, Haryana, for example, Telangana, for example, Manipur. What we see is that in these states, almost 45% of children are in private schools. In Telangana, more than 57% are in private school, and in Manipur, about 75% are in private schools. Do you see the change in trend in certain regions of the country? Why is that the case? And this is something that you will use. This statement is something that you will use. That despite the existence of free education till class 8th in the primary stage of the schooling, there are certain regions in the country, certain states such as Telangana and Manipur, where the majority of the children are going to private school despite the existence of free education. What does this indicate? The problem of quantity has been solved, but the problem of quality is lagging. Problem of quality. According to ACER report released by Pratham organization, there are major issues, several gaps. There are a lot of children in the primary school. A class 5th student cannot read simple text of class 2nd. These kind of figures keep coming in the newspapers, and therefore by this statement you are justifying and explaining the qualitative problem in India's education system, in the government education system. Yes, so quality problem you will talk about. Of course, there are various reasons why this is happening, because there is an increase in maybe disposable income. People can now afford to send their children to schools. There are also issues, there are also availability of a lot of low budget schools. There is also a general perception that government schools are generally teaching in regional languages, so on and so forth, and English education per se is considered superior as compared to other education, and private education institutions deliver that. Yes, so this perception also exists, and these are the reasons why people are choosing. But do you see how you will give a statement that despite the existence of RTE, free and compulsory education, yet people are not choosing in a few states to send their children to school. Majority of them are going to now private schools. And therefore we need what? We need proper reforms in order to solve the qualitative aspect of education. The quantity aspect we have almost catered to. Did you understand how to use the mains enrichment point? That is all that you need to use when you're doing education as a sector in GS2. That is all. Next topic. Solar as a game changer in women's empowerment. This is simple. You do not need to remember too much. You just need to remember that because of solar, the dependence on energy, the dependence on electricity from a certain centralized apparatus, for example, requiring a transmission line, etc., is not a problem anymore. So, because of this, there is democratized, you'll just use few words, democratized, decentralized. That means energy is not produced somewhere else and brought to the household. It is produced on the rooftop of the household and can be accessed. So because of this access, what we see is that there is a huge boost when it comes to safety of women. A lot of solar powered lights in villages, in remote areas, even where electricity was a problem. The safety aspect is enhanced when it comes to women. It also is a low cost alternative for farming equipment. For example, have you heard about the Kusum Yojana? A lot of solar water pumps. Solar pumps can be used and they are an alternative to the diesel pumps. And because we are seeing that an overwhelming portion of the farmers are now females, the term feminization of farming or feminization of agriculture, and therefore it helps in increasing their disposable income. They do not have to invest in diesel and any other energy related costs per se. Yes, so these are the low cost examples. Examples in the run of Kutch area. This is what the author is saying. The farmers are using, the female farmers are using the solar water pumps or the solar pumps to withdraw water and not diesel pumps. Yes. Next, it is also helping a lot of self-help groups. A self-help group now that is constituting of a number of women are coming together to invest in that rooftop solar so that they can have access to electricity and they can use this electricity maybe for certain handloom, for certain power loom purposes, so on and so forth, and start a business. So it is also helping in entrepreneurship, economic empowerment per se. Yes, we will also see that a lot of jobs created as solar engineers or women engaged in creating solar panels or fixing solar panels, so on and so forth. That is also a lot of jobs in the solar energy sector are employing women per se, and that is you can write. Clear? And unlike other sources of energy, it is not leading to underdevelopment of the region. For example, because of coal mining, etc., there is a major resource curse in areas such as Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Jharkhand, and so on. They are extracting coal from those regions, but those regions are severely underdeveloped. But with solar energy, what happens is that wherever you are investing in solar energy, it leads to the development of that place. Yes. And in turn, that development also trickles down and helps women per se. Yes. So these are simple social benefits that you can write when it comes to solar as an empowerment. Last topic that you to use as mains enrichment. Beautiful, beautiful. Now this is about a woman called Bilquis Mir. Bilquis Mir. She is called the Aqua Queen. You can just simply retain the information that I have written. You do not need to read anything. She is called the Aqua Queen of India. She is a Kashmiri, and this is a picture of her kayaking and canoeing in the waters of the Dal Lake. She is the first Indian to be on a Olympic jury panel per se. Yes, so she is someone who has, even in an environment where she had to break social barriers. This is an example you will write in essays or women empowerment related examples, and therefore you would say that these are some of the firsts that a woman does. For example, you have Malala Yousafzai, who was one of the first to stand against the atrocities of Taliban, to kind of speak against the repressive policies, to talk about women's empowerment. She is also the same. In fact, she is a coach, she's an instructor of canoeing and kayaking, which is something that will be very difficult for the Indian society to accept. Yes, and therefore, because of her efforts, of her training the local Kashmiri women, what we saw in the Dal Lake was an all-women boat race where women are defying certain restrictions on the type of activity that they can pursue, on the kind of sports, water sports that they can pursue, the kind of clothes that they can wear, and she is inspiring a lot more. So you can give an example of her being the first woman who is on an Olympic jury panel per se. Okay, and she's a kayaking and a canoeing coach. So that is all that you need to know for mains enrichment. These kind of little facts or certain examples give you a huge edge over the others when it comes to mains scoring. So with this, we've come to an end for today's lecture. I hope you stayed with me, and you will pour in your love in the form of likes, comments, share, etc. Please, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, we will be having all the UCAN sessions in this month on YouTube, so make sure that you take full benefit of the same. So with this, I will be signing off. Thank you so much for your patience. Good night. Bye bye.